Compliance is a profession where people work tirelessly to make the world a better place. And there are hundreds of amazing and inspiring women who have helped the field develop into what it is today. Great Women in Compliance is part of the Compliance Podcast Network, so join Mary, Shirley, and Lisa Fine as they talk with women in compliance who are making a difference.
Welcome to the Great Women in Compliance podcast, where Lisa Fine and Mary Shirley feature outstanding women in the field of compliance and provide actionable advice for compliance officers to advance in the workplace. I'm Mary Shirley, and today I'm pleased to have our guest, Michelle Shapiro, who's a partner at Orient Fox, with us. Welcome, Michelle. Please tell us about yourself.
Hi, Mary. First of all, let me say thank you so much for inviting me to join your podcast. I've been a fan for a long while, and it's really exciting to be a part of this because I think that what you're doing is really important. When I started out as a young lawyer in the 90s, compliance as we know it today didn't really exist.
Right.
I mean, having an effective compliance program, that was the buzz phrase. It was a mitigating factor that the U.S. sentencing guidelines said that courts should consider when crafting an appropriate sentence for an organization. That was visionary at the time, but the framework for what that meant was kind of bare bones. And we've come a long way since then. Obviously the DOJ and the SEC have published a lot of guidance on their expectations. Sarbanes-Oxley has, come along and formalized the area. So along the way, the visibility of compliance and ethics programs has really increased. And many of the women that you and Lisa feature in your podcast should really be receiving their fair share of the credit for getting us to where we are today. So anyway, thank you for having me. I'll actually answer your question now.
Well, thank you for your kind words. Appreciate it.
Which is, so I've been a white-collar criminal defense attorney for over 20 years. And as part of my practice, I represent companies and individuals through all phases of government investigations and criminal proceedings related to high-stakes issues like alleged corruption, insider trading, money laundering, tax evasion, all kinds of fraud, healthcare fraud, securities fraud, antitrust violations, cyber crimes. The list kind of goes on and on. I like to say, anything that starts with Title 18 in the U.S. Code is probably something that's of interest to me. And then I also help companies conduct internal investigations where there's a suspicion of potential misconduct by corporate officers, employees, or agents. One thing that distinguishes my background from that of a lot of other white-collar defense lawyers is that I have never been a prosecutor. I am a dyed-in-the-wool defense attorney, and I wear with a badge of pride the fact that I've never put anyone in jail. A lot of my friends and colleagues are former prosecutors, and I love them, and I love partnering with them. I think we bring different skill sets to the table, and we just sort of see things slightly differently. We have a diversity of our experiences and views, and I think that in the end helps serve the clients. But at the end of the day, I've just spent my career trying to keep people out of trouble. And so sometimes that means defending them after there's an allegation or a suspicion. But a big part of my problem is helping companies and clients, individual clients, avoid the problem in the first place, like embracing compliance. So that's what I like to spend my time doing where I can.
So have you been private practice the entire time?
I have. I've been in private practice the entire time. A couple of different firms, big firms. I was at a small white-collar boutique for a while. I joined Orient Fox in June of last year. One of the reasons why I joined really is because of its particular expertise in business compliance. We have multiple partners who have served or are currently serving as independent compliance monitors for major companies that have settled with various federal, state, and international enforcement agencies. So taking some of that expertise and working with clients to apply it proactively at the front end before there's a problem is, in my opinion, one of the greatest contributions that we can make to our clients.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's very much in parallel with the typical role of the compliance officer in terms of a lot of the work that we do. It's more that proactive side of things. So that's fantastic. And making a partner in a law firm is one of the great aspirational goals of many law students or young lawyers. How can someone tell if striving to be a partner in a law firm is the right goal for them? And the reason I ask you that is that whilst it may seem all sort of shiny and high-powered suits and serious work, the reality is we're not all cut out for private practice. I am still not, I believe. So how did you know that it was the right thing for you? And for what would your advice be for others who are trying to make that assessment for themselves?
When I was a first-year associate at a law firm in a class of, maybe 50 or so other first-year associates, I had a classmate who declared virtually on day one that she was going to make partner at the firm. She had this very singular vision. She talked about it all the time. Her confidence was laudable, though frankly also kind of terrifying at the same time. But more than anything, I remember being struck by the clarity of her vision,
right,
which I didn't necessarily have. I knew I wanted to succeed. And, as a student, defining success was pretty easy. I went to college, I graduated with honors, I went on to Columbia Law School. That was all a path that I guess prior schooling or my parents had made very clear. But as a newly minted lawyer, I really didn't know how to define success for myself. So it really took me more than a few years, as well as a few law firms, frankly, for me to realize that, yes, I did in fact want to be a law firm partner. And I got there because I had the great fortune of working with some amazing partners who showed up every day for work, excited to be there. And, they made their job seem really rewarding and showed me how to navigate what can be, a political minefield at times to make being a partner make sense for me. So, I think the best advice that I could give law students and young lawyers is just keep your eyes and your mind open. Your eyes need to be open so that you can look around, right? You have to be able to look up, look down, look left, look right, and ask yourself whether you want to climb that partner ladder, either at the law firm where you are or wherever you may land afterwards. And you have to keep your mind open to how to define success for you. And it might not be the same answer as that of your classmate or office mate, but it's also not necessarily going to be the same answer for yourself when you're, 20 something years old as when you're 30 or 40 something or later. So I think keeping your mind open and periodically reassessing your goals is the right path. It was for me. Not to be too corny here, but we talk about how compliance assessments are so important to an effective compliance program, right? Every so often, pause and take note of what you're doing well, what you're doing not well, identify gaps and plug them, So I just think that the same can really be true of our careers. I don't think any of us should be making the decision once and then just go barreling down a path to get there. I think periodically reassessing and making sure it's still the right decision for you, whether it's to become a law firm partner or otherwise, is the best way to achieve your own success.
I love that analogy. I think it's because I'm a compliance nerd, but I love that you drew in an example from the compliance world, and it's totally right. It's one of my big things, the keeping an open mind aspect. For people generally, I find of my age or above, most of us didn't select compliance, right? Referring back to what you said earlier, it just wasn't a thing that existed that you could proactively go out there and decide, hey, this is going to be my area. And so a lot of us, we describe it as, a happy accident or falling into compliance. And it's turned out to be the perfect career and the perfect choice for many of us, even if it wasn't the choice that 20-year-old me made at that time. And even beyond, I would say for those of us who are super happy in compliance, keep an open mind as to what you might want to do next. There are so many people who are thinking about opening up compliance consultancies and going out there on their own rather than being a compliance officer or doing something a little bit different that their compliance skill set has prepared them for. So I'm fully with you on the keeping an open mind thing. And it can seem admirable when someone seems so set and determined and ambitious and has that clarity of where they think they want to go. But just as importantly is being able to pivot and adapt and also understand that changing of your dreams just because you were emotionally invested before doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. It just means that something better has come to light for you and is a better choice.
And P.S., the woman in my story, not a law firm partner.
And I think I actually expected that when you started telling the story, right? That I thought that was going to be the punchline, was that she didn't actually end up doing what she thought she was going to do, because life just changes us and takes us in so many different directions that it's hard to always stay on that straight line when there are so many other either tempting things off to the side or things that push you off track and you feel like they're a negative thing at the time, but they were just leading you to something better suited. Michelle, one of the great things that I like about you is that you're heavily involved in the Women's White Collar Defence Association. So I think this would be familiar to some of our listeners, but perhaps not all. Would you please tell us about what the mission is of this association and share how it has helped to advance women in white-collar legal and compliance roles?
With pleasure. The Women's White Collar Defense Association, or the WWCDA, is really one of the great joys of my legal career, putting aside counseling clients. I love being involved actively in this organization. I am the global co-chair of the development committee, and I've watched it grow into just really an amazing organization. Our esteemed co-founder, Karen Popp, often describes us as a 20-year-old startup. And that's because it was about 20 years ago that a group of women gathered at an industry conference, a white-collar conference, and noted just the absolute glaring lack of women who were there. And they saw, only men on the panels at the conference. They saw very few female faces in the audience. And they also saw how a large group of men would convene a day before this conference started every year to play golf. And how those men, these very successful men, were excellent at referring work to one another. So that's one aspect of the white collar, business development arena that's somewhat unique from other practice areas, because we don't strictly look to clients for work. We look to other defense lawyers for referrals, whether it's because there's a big joint defense team being assembled or because one lawyer has a conflict. But, we refer work to one another all the time. Anyway, going back to these women who didn't have any interest in playing golf, they vowed to create their own outlet for professional networking. And so Spa Day was born. So rather than golf, this group of women decided that they would meet up the day before the conference to enjoy each other's company at a nearby spa. And it wasn't just about having fun. It was also about really getting to know each other so that when opportunities came to refer work, they would think of these other women. And Spa Day grew and grew and grew to the point where the facilities couldn't even accommodate the group anymore. And at the same time, women, white-collar lawyers across the United States were forming groups to network locally. So DC had an arm or a chapter, and New York had a chapter, and Boston had a chapter. And since then, the organization has really exploded. I mean, thanks to Karen's vision, we now have, I think at last count, it was 39 chapters around the world, not just the United States, with more on the cusp of being launched. We have over 1,700 members. It's like legit. It's the real deal. We're incorporated. We have a formal governance structure, and we have a clear mission statement and goals, which, if you wouldn't mind, I would love to tell you about.
Yeah, please.
Because they're important. So the first goal is to promote diversity in the legal profession, and specifically in our field of criminal, civil, regulatory, and administrative enforcement, as well as internal investigations, compliance, and ethics. So that's what our members do. But it's all on the law firm or consulting side of the equation. No in-house lawyers allowed. Sorry. We also provide networking and business development opportunities for our members in their local markets, as well as nationally and internationally. Our third goal is to develop educational programming that's focused on those same legal fields that I mentioned before. Fourth, we are facilitating collaboration and communication among our members and participants. And finally, we develop resources to assist our members and participants. So those are the stated goals. And the organization just works every day around the world to achieve them. And just going back to Spa Day, it has now evolved into what is our formal annual meeting. We have hundreds of women that gather together to engage in learning and networking. We have panel programs and guest speakers. We've had business development coaching sessions. It's really an impressive agenda. It's still the day before the big conference while the men are off golfing. And there's other programming throughout the year. Each of the chapters might do their own local programming, and then the WWCDA as sort of, the mothership does programming. One thing that I'm really excited about that's coming up is our first inaugural awards dinner, which we are hosting in December. It's December 3rd in National Harbor outside of Washington, D.C. Former Deputy Attorney General Sally Yates, who is now a WWCDA member, is going to serve as our Master of Ceremonies. And we're going to distribute 4 awards to honor those whose efforts have enhanced the white-collar practice, making it more diverse and equitable, those who have otherwise, used their platforms to support women in this field. So the award recipients were just announced. It's pretty exciting. We're going to honor Mary Jo White as our first WWCDA champion. She's, of course, a true trailblazer, There's a group award, which is going to the Olympus Corporation of the Americas. They recently completed a compliance monitorship. Legal and compliance teams led by women have really set the standard for how a company should handle a monitorship. Another award recipient is Joan McPhee. She is a practitioner who is receiving the Lori A. Miller Leadership Award for the advancement of women in white-collar defense. That award is in honor of Lori Miller, who passed away. She's a former WWCDA member, not just a member, really. She was one of the founding original members of the DC chapter, and really just an absolute groundbreaker, both in terms of her practice and advancing other women in the practice. She actually touched my practice and development as a young lawyer as well. When I was a young associate, I wanted to get involved in the white-collar crime subcommittee of the ABA's litigation section. And at the time, Lori was the chair. And when I expressed an interest in getting more involved, she said, "Great, you can be our new website editor," which I had no idea what that meant. Thank goodness that the ABA was really supporting the technical aspects, because to this day, I really couldn't tell you how to be a webmaster. But I was responsible for coordinating content, and that meant I got to network with some of the best and brightest white-collar lawyers around the country. So anyway, Lori helped make that happen for me, and Joan getting the award in her name is really well deserved. There's one more award I just need to mention, which is in honor of the late Kathy O'Neill, another WWCDA member who left us far too soon. She was one of the founding members of the Atlanta chapter. She will always be remembered, among other things, for her leadership in and dedication to mentoring young lawyers. And so this year, an associate from Atlanta will receive the Kathy O'Neill Award, which comes with a continuing education stipend that was fully funded by Kathy's law firm partners as a way to help make sure her legacy continues. Yeah, it's really special.
Lovely.
And it's our first year doing it. There's more information on the website. So if you wouldn't mind just a quick plug, our website is wwcda.org, and there's a page on there all about the awards dinner, how to get tickets. If anyone's interested in sponsoring the event, it's really going to be a nice night. So check it out.
Awesome. And something that you mentioned struck a chord for me, which is, when you were doing your job as part of this association, it enabled you to meet a lot of people. And interestingly, I've found that, and maybe it's because I'm an introvert, when Lisa Fine and I have been when we've been doing our sort of side gig job of this podcast, I found it a lot easier to network with people, having conversations with people such as yourself, to plan and getting our guests on board, people writing into us with questions or giving feedback. Then I feel it is in a sort of a more carte blanche environment of networking, where you maybe are at a mixer which is specifically set up. And so I guess what I would say is a tip for networking is that working on a project like this, and it doesn't need to be as formal as this association that you contribute a lot to, it can be far more informal. And I'd like to talk a minute about how in-house lawyers and compliance professionals can replicate something similar. It seems to me to be a really nice, I think segue is probably not the right word, but almost opportunity. If you're having to talk to people as part of another little project that you're focused and concentrating on, it makes networking so much easier. Did you find that too?
Always easier to connect with someone when you can find something that you have in common. And so whether that's a shared experience or a shared goal, because you're both trying to pull a project together, I first of all have to say, kind of fascinated by the fact that you always define yourself as an introvert. I've heard you say it before, Mary, and it still stuns me because you have such a presence. So well done at overcoming that, I suppose. Surprising. But having, really a clear vision of what you're connecting with someone about, I think definitely makes it easier. I personally hate the sort of the schmooze fest and having to walk around a room and kind of introduce yourself to a group of random, 3 or 4 people having a conversation and find a way to connect that way. But like a project, like, okay, let's draft an article together or a little blurb for the website, or figure out, in the case of the WWCDA, I think part of why we've been really successful in having our members participate in a lot of the development committee initiatives is that it gives you an organic reason to get to know these women instead of just saying like, okay, now we're all part of this great, big, happy family. No, okay, let's roll up our sleeves and figure out how we're going to tackle this task, whatever it is. So we've got a team that is trying to develop a thought leadership study that we want to send out to the masses and then crunch the data and see what comes out and really put the association at the forefront of a thought leadership piece. So this group of 5 or 6 women have really gotten to know each other in the course of that work, as opposed to just having to share a glass of wine at a cocktail reception. Not that there's anything wrong with sharing a glass of wine.
Absolutely. And so it sounds like it is, in some ways, of course, the aim is to embrace diversity and promote the advancement of women. However, in a certain sense, it is also quite a niche group. When we consider that in-house lawyers and compliance professionals generally wouldn't be eligible to join. So if someone was interested in cultivating perhaps a more informal setup, what would your advice be for replicating something similar for those who wouldn't be able to attend this association?
So first, I would just say that while our membership is limited, we do have events that we very much welcome in-house lawyers and compliance professionals to participate in. One of the things we're currently working on is enhancing our website to include more information about the events that we have around the world so that people can see what's going on and join us. But in terms of, I've never been in-house. Do you have suggestions?
Yeah, absolutely. Listeners? And so I would probably model it off one of the sort of for all genders, just compliance groups generally. And I want to give a massive shout out to the compliance community of the little town, the little country state city of Singapore. They have a massive group. It's put together by a gentleman called Bala. And that group takes turns hosting compliance events at each other's offices. One of the most memorable, I'm going to say it's because it was my last one before I moved to the US, but it was Heineken. And they put on, drinks obviously in their office. And then we sat down for sort of a formal presentation. A law firm, I think, was brought in for that one and did a wee panel. And then there was mixing and mingling afterwards. So that's a more formal setup where they are quite organized and take a great deal of pride in hosting other compliance professionals from the city and think about different things that they can share. So there's usually a little bit of substantive thought leadership as well as opportunities to mingle in a more casual way over drinks and snacks. So there's nothing really stopping anyone from doing that kind of thing and making it an advancement for women group. And of course, gentlemen, I assume would be very welcome. In promoting the cause of such a thing. Although thinking about the setup for your association, it was more the idea that women get the opportunity to specifically mingle with each other and help with referrals and so on. So up to the organisers as to how they would structure the membership. And then on the other end of the scale, I'm thinking of what Matt Kelly and I do for Drinks in Boston, and you're new to the Boston area, so it may be that this could be a helpful opportunity for you. So Matt and I, every now and again, we decide we haven't done drinks for a while. That's how casual it is. We don't have a set timeline or anything. And we send invitations out, put notes up on LinkedIn and invite people from the greater compliance community to join us, meet people, establish connections and get to know each other better. So I know that there are various different groups. I think the DC one exists. That's more like the Singapore one in terms of being a bit more organized and not just Matt and I flicking each other a text randomly to set it up on a whim. But the thing is, anything can turn into something useful. So whatever suits you. So if you're in-house and you're interested, have a look at the Women's White Collar Defence Association website for the events that are open to everyone, or contact Michelle about those. And if you're feeling particularly ballsy, set up your own. It's, for Matt and I, it's as simple as logging onto a complimentary Evite website. Matt usually creates the invitation, so he does a lot of the heavy lifting. But again, if that's all the heavy lifting, it's not that bad. And then we both promote it together. So similar things can be done in any city that you're in, and even remotely. So I'm just thinking about like Caitlin Toby's remote workshops that she does for compliance certification. You could replicate that as a networking opportunity as well. It might take a little bit more thought to consider what is the secret ingredient that will draw people and keep them engaged in a website type environment. But I'm sure there's a lot more creative people out there than me who would be thinking on such a thing. So those are my thoughts. I haven't given it too much thought, as you can probably tell, but I am for sure gung-ho about the idea that anyone can set up something and plant the seed and watch it turn into a flourishing plant, as has been done with your association. And for anyone who is eligible and interested to join, how would they go about that?
First stop would be www.cda.org. You can look up the chapter in your city and you'll see the information for the chapter leaders. Their email addresses and phone numbers are there, so reach out to them to find out how to join. If your city is not listed and you think that a WWCDA chapter could thrive in your neck of the woods, I would say reach out to me or to Karen Pop to talk about how you might get that started. Our contact information is on the website. One of the other things we do to try to promote women in the field is there's a Find a Professional tab where you can look up people by name or by city or by specific practice area within the broader umbrella of white-collar defense.
Thank you. Well, that's all the time that we have today for this two-part series with Michelle. I will leave you all for the day and invite you to check back again soon for our second part of these episodes coming out shortly. Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Great Women in Compliance. We hope you'll join us in honoring the great women in the compliance field by subscribing to this podcast and leaving a review.